Great, welcome. Yeah, let's have the next slide with the instructions for introducing yourselves in the chat if you acknowledge the Indigenous land. And again, we're recording and we'll be sharing this recording in an email with any other resources that are presented. Welcome, everyone. Okay. Well, let's get started. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just to hold the space for community and positive experiences with each other. Questions, if you please use the Q&A function for questions. We'll be answering them throughout, and that helps us really log whether or not we've been able to address questions. So please use Q&A for questions and the chat for comments, and avoid buzzwords and jargons, or if you find yourself leaning into that, if you could explain or expand so we all know what we're talking about. And respectful dialogue in the chat is appreciated. And if you're not comfortable speaking at any point, you can enter comments and questions in the Zoom chat or questions. Next slide. And if you'd like to activate subtitles to be able to read the conversation as well, you can click on the CC button under Show Captions down below. And then the Q&A feature, you can access through the icons Q&A or the comment, or use the chat feature, which is that icon below. Next slide. And then in terms of being able to see folks, we're using Spotlight feature. We'll have some slide decks. And if you want to be able to see the speaker and the slides, in the upper view, you can select the side-by-side different options for your view and what works best for you on whichever, whether you're on a computer or a phone. And then we'll be having an open panel discussion with all the speakers highlighted, which would be probably the gallery view would be the most useful. Next slide. And your hosts today are California Arts Advocates, your direct lobbying voice in Sacramento. We work to advance arts, culture, and creative industries, working to influence equitable and just systems change and public policy and public investment. And California for the Arts, your statewide arts advocacy network. And we provide programming services and are building regional and statewide advocacy networks and hubs to build a movement of folks advocating for a thriving cultural sector and creative industries. Next slide. So today we're going to cover we have great guests to have a conversation together. Tooshar Swain from Americans for the Arts will be giving us updates on what's happening on the federal level and also talk about advocacy actions and strategies. And Julie Baker, our CEO, will be giving us an update on California issues. The governor just issued the May revise yesterday, so we've got some news there, and we'll speak to some of the advocacy strategies and approaches that we will be using. And also our lobbyist Jason has joined us as well, and he's gonna be joining Julie on that, so he's a surprise guest, extra special. And then local updates and strategies. We've got Peter Allen from San Jose Advocates, Akib Rahman from Arts for LA, and Michelangelo Camacho from San Diego Arts Matters to talk about what's happening in local communities and then to join in a larger strategy discussion as a panel. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tooshar, and thank you everybody for joining us. And...
Hi there, everybody. My name is Tooshar Swain. I am Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. We're a national advocacy organization located in Washington, D.C. And so we have been monitoring all the things happening in Washington, D.C. Since President Trump's inauguration on January 20th. President Trump unveiled his skinny budget earlier this month. A skinny budget is typically done during the first term of a new president, because they don't have that fourth quarter before they come in to adequately prepare for a budget. And so they will often do what's called a skinny budget to kind of get the ball moving, to let Congress know about what their priorities, at least some of their priorities are. So maybe Congress can begin some of their appropriations work. And so the president then will unveil his full budget. Um, we're expecting that sometime at the end of this month, or or in the beginning of June. And again, it's not, these are things that we certainly anticipated due to what's been happening with things, dealing with the Department of Government Efficiency, as well as some of his executive orders, and what he did with his budgets in 2017 through 2020. Here, non-defense spending has been reduced, which is also often called domestic spending, which has been reduced by 22.6%. There are, huge concerns with the lack of priorities for our cultural agencies. And so our cultural agencies, which I, here define as the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services. You all see those acronyms spelled out on subsequent slides on their headers as we talk about them. But those agencies have been zeroed out, so have been requested to have been zeroed out. This is not a binding document. This is only a request to Congress. But it is telling about how he feels right now about those agencies. And then we'll talk about some of the things that have actually happened as it pertains to reductions of force and some grant cancellations in all of these agencies as well. And I'm sure that arts education is of interest to some of you, particularly with Prop 28 here in California. But the budget actually, $4.5 billion is a lot of money. It's not as big of a cut as we were maybe anticipating for K through 12 education funding at the Department of Education. However, his request is for formula grants such as Title I to be streamlined to the states to be given in a block grant type of way that limits the authority of the Department of Education. You might know of some of those executive orders where he calls to dismantle the Department of Education and wants to work with Congress to do that. That fortunately, excuse me, requires 60 votes in the Senate. And so we don't foresee that happening, but he's certainly trying to do the best that he can with the powers that he has on the executive side. He also wishes to simplify funding programs by consolidating 18 competitive and formula grant programs into a new $2 billion formula grant. And so, for example, he doesn't make explicitly clear, because it's a skinny budget, what the details are of those consolidations, but we would anticipate, a program such as the Assistance for Arts and Education program, which doles out grants for modeling innovative ways to teach arts education. We would expect that to kind of be rolled up into this grant as well. Then I think the most concerning thing on the arts education side is allowing states and districts to focus on core subjects, math, reading, science, and history, without the distractions of DEIA and weaponization from the previous administration, as we've seen at the state level in, quite a few states, unfortunately, that Often things like social emotional learning has been wrapped into to DEIA, and for that reason has tried to exclude arts education, particularly at the local level. So that is some unfortunate language as well. Next slide, please. So I've talked about the cultural agencies, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So we'll start here with the National Endowment for the Humanities, DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, which was created by President Trump and originally given to lead that. He gave Elon Musk that role to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. Reports insist that he's not as active as he has been or as he was through the month of April. So we're waiting to see, what that means for DOGE. But as it pertains to the National Endowment for the Arts, DOGE has terminated more than 1,400 grants to organizations and individuals throughout the U.S. This includes operating supporting grants to humanities councils in every state in Washington, D.C., as well as the U.S. territories. This was statutorily required, so this feels like an illegal act and is being litigated through the courts right now. Additionally, there were staff firings that have the agency operating somewhere between 20 to 25 to 30% of the original capacity. One thing that I don't have here is that there are two lawsuits, one that was filed by the American Council of Learned Societies, the American Historical Association, and the Modern Language Association, as well as one filed by the Authors Guild. And again, they're suing on the illegality that, according to the plaintiffs, that these actions threaten the future of American research and history, literature, languages, and other humanities disciplines, and that they violate the Impoundment Control Act because the administration is refusing to distribute funds appropriated, as well as the separation of powers and the Administrative Procedures Act, because this all has lacked transparency, fairness, and accountability, which is an important part of the Administrative Procedures Act. And so, it's a different time. We can talk a little bit about later potentially about why we're advocating for what we're advocating for, but even during this time, we continue to advocate for $209 million, hoping that the courts will do the right thing here and overturn what is happening at the National Endowment for the Humanities. Next slide, please. Institute of Museum and Library Services. This offers granting across the United States as well as research and policy development for museum and library services across the country. On March 31st, through executive order, President Trump issued the dismantling of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which has terminated most staff. And this, of course, marked a severe attack on our cultural infrastructure. An acting director who is a deputy at the Department of Labor became the acting director of the IMLS. The IMLS, or he, within a couple of days, fired the IMLS board, who was trying to preserve the institute. From there, he reduced staff from 78 employees to 12. they had begun canceling grants to museums, to libraries, and state library systems. I believe California is one of those states. Again, this was actually reauthorized during the first Trump administration, so it was once again reenacted to law with some amendments and changes during the first Trump administration. Because of that, and because of the dwindling down of this to its statutory requirements, but really going far beyond that, a district court temporarily has blocked the dismantling following lawsuits by our friends and partners of the American Library Association, as well as the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees because of their lawsuit. Now, all of this has happened, right? Grants have started to have been canceled, so folks are not receiving their grants. The staff has already been cut to 12, so it's hard to know what they can do to retroactively fix this, at least in the short term. But we'll continue to monitor that. We are advocating for $294.8 million, which is a slight increase from last year. Next slide. Thank you. National Endowment for the Arts. So this situation is a little bit different than what we're seeing at IMLS and the NEH, and that is because a senior political appointee, senior advisor, Marianne Carter, is there. She is the former chair of the NEA during President Trump's first term, and because there was a political appointee at its senior leadership as opposed to IMLS and the NEH, it hasn't been dealt with quite in the same way. So at the NEH, the Department of Government Efficiency actually came to NEH headquarters to basically shut down their systems. For IMLS, the president issued an executive order, and then DOGE came and shut down their systems. National Endowment for the Arts, DOGE visited their headquarters, but they've been working with Miss Carter to try to come up with a understanding that these executive orders are in place, such as the reduction in force executive order, as well as the reduction of federal footprint. So Ms. Carter has been working with DOGE to minimize some of these some of these reductions in force as well as reductions in grants. Nonetheless, it has still been harmful and still something that we very much are strongly advocating against. We found out on May 2nd that the NEA sent notifications of terminated awards as well as rescinded offers, so withdrawals of offers based on new presidential priorities. And so they said from now on, grants will have to adhere to the new presidential priorities, which include HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions, celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence, fostering AI competency, empowering houses of worship to serve communities, making America healthy again, making Washington, D.C. safe and beautiful, supporting our military and our veterans, and supporting tribal communities. And so they terminated many grants based on the fact that they did not adhere to these presidential priorities. And they were notified that they had a week to make an appeal. Now they did it they did it with a little bit of a runway in that you had until May 31st to close out your grants, to incur more costs, as well as to pay for those costs, and then submitting your financial report by June 30th. So there is a little bit of a runway there. But still, this has been very harmful, no doubt, to the arts community. And then we just learned on Tuesday, May 13th, that the NEA sent out more notifications of terminated awards, and what they call expedited closeouts, based again on these new presidential priorities. They have until May 20th to appeal that decision. And so we'll talk a little bit later about our Protect the NEA webpage, which gives some guidance for those of you who might have NEA grants on what to do next if you have received any of these kinds of notices. And then I think the last thing I'll say, which I should have put on the slide, is that Marianne Carter, again, former chair during Trump's first term, has been officially nominated to be the chair again. Her name was officially sent to the Senate, where they will do their advise and consent to ultimately what we think will be to confirm her. She seems to resonate very well on both sides of the aisle. And our fiscal ask for 2026 is $209 million. Next slide. And we'll talk a little bit more about the taking action on some of these issues. Can go to our Protect the NEA website, which asks you to take action with your elected officials, either by email, phone, or letter. Complete the National Pulse Survey. We have a survey out there that we want as many organizations to fill out as possible, so we can get a better understanding and report out to the field about how specifically these happenings in Washington, D.C. are affecting your communities. We certainly want you to share your story. Connect with your local state and arts organizations. We have a social media toolkit. And then, we do, like I said, this is the take action portion of it, but we also have some tools on how to navigate these grant cancellations and these withdrawal notifications. We worked very closely with our friends at the Film Festival Alliance, who's put out some great guidance. We had a webinar last week that focuses more on what to do during this time in terms of navigating the process, and might have some time to talk a little bit about that later too.
Great. If anyone has any questions for Tooshar, we'll have a wider discussion at the end of our strategy session. And Jenica's putting resources in the chat that Tooshar is discussing, including their Americans for the Arts is offering advocacy office hours. And we've been having meetings on cultivating a national strategy, which we can touch on a little bit later. But if there are any questions right now, checking the chat. Okay. I think what we'll do is if we can shift and have introduced Julie Baker, our CEO for California Arts Advocates, Californians for the Arts. And Tooshar will keep track of the Q&A and see if anything in the Pulse survey. Okay, great. Thank you, Erica. Is the Pulse survey for individuals or just organizations? I think that question's for you, Tooshar.
Yes, it is. It is for organizations. However, if you go to the Protect Your Media campaign that we put down there in the link, the opportunity to share your story is there. That is again for individuals as well as organizations, and that a lot of space to write exactly how that is affecting you individually. The Pulse survey is intended for organizations, local arts agencies, that sort of thing.
Great. Good question. Thank you. And Michael, I see your question about elected officials and lobbying. Why don't we leave that one for the whole group to address in the strategy session? I'll surface that question during that part of the agenda if you don't mind holding off on that, because I think that might be valuable for us to discuss. Okay, thank you. And next up, Julie Baker.
Thanks, Tracy. Welcome, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Boy, things are intense, aren't they, for everybody? So I'm going to get into this where we are in the California budget process. I have a lot of questions for Tooshar, but we'll get a chance to talk to everybody together or whatever about this. So we'll go to the next slide. Just kind of quick context where we are in terms of the budget process. A bit of a busy slide right now, but I'll show you in the May. We are in the month of May, and that is where we are right now in terms of the May revise, which I will report on in a second. And in April, of course, many of you, over 350, joined us in Sacramento for Arts Advocacy Day. And that was really an opportunity for us to lift up priorities, both for the budget and for our legislation this year. And this just kind of gives you an idea of how the whole budget process works. Slightly different every year, depending on what's going on in terms of, the federal picture right now is really impacting the state budget. And I also will welcome Jason Schmelzer, our lobbyist, to also join me in when we get to questions, or if he wants to just also add in here. So it's just kind of an overview of where we are on the timeline. So go to the next slide. So, when we started off the year, then the governor presents his budget in January. There were, and then the overall picture at that point it was a proposed budget of $322 billion. At that moment, it was in time, a snapshot in January was a modest surplus. It's also what we've seen in terms of the bill cycle. And this is pretty average, around 2,500 bills introduced in a year. So as you can imagine, as your lobbying organization for arts, culture, and creative industries, it's a lot to cover to see which ones impact our sector. And many do, because we all are impacted by a lot of different things: education, housing, all sorts of issues. So we try and track as many as we can. And then, of course, this year, based on what you just heard from Tooshar, which is more recent news, but we're also, of course, there's so much federal funding insecurity for the whole of the state budget. About 30% of California's budget is dependent upon federal funds. So you're going to hear Governor Newsom talk a lot about the Trump slump, I think is what he says, in terms of the impact on the California budget. And just to kind of overall context too, and some of these initiatives to watch were kind of something more towards the beginning of the year. And honestly, the May revise came out yesterday, so you're going to get our kind of fresh response to all of this. Is that $70.5 million since 2023 has been cut in California's budget for arts and culture. Not a great look for California. Last year, the May revise came out and both tried to cut 10 million from the California Arts Council's local assistance grants budget over for the rest, just ongoing. We were able to fend that off and get it reduced to 5 million over 2 years. So next year, technically, it should come back, but every year, you get sort of another conversation around that. 27.9 million museum grants funds were also cut last year after the May revise, sort of behind closed doors. It was not in the May revise. It was done in last minute negotiations. Those grants were actually already in process. People had already applied, and that was slashed. We also saw a cut from 25 to 11 million from arts in the parks, and 30 million to 20 million for cultural districts. So we're really hurting here in California right now in terms of funding directly for arts and culture. You're seeing that at the federal level, and we'll talk about the local level as well. So next slide. So just as again, for those who are interested specifically in our state arts agency's history and California Arts Council, you'll see here that for in the years in the early 2000s, at the highest budget point was $30.7 million for the agency. Those who are tracking and looking at the dot on all the way to the right, we're currently at 21 million. So we're actually behind where we were 2 decades ago, unfortunately, for the California Arts Council. And that's not even adjusting for inflation. While everything else has gone up in terms of our costs to do business, employment costs, and all the other things, unfortunately, the grant program right now is actually less. So we're again always trying to educate lawmakers to what is the real picture here, and how we are essentially an agency and a field. I'm sorry, we're not the agency, but the agency, the California Arts Council, and the sector has really been, sort of de-invested in recently. So next slide. This is also where do we stand right now in terms of, and this is the National Assembly of State Arts Agency. NASA has a sort of like raise your ranking. It tells you where you can sort of look at it and decide, based on 21 million, where do we stand? I can't always say this is entirely apples to apples in terms of, do we know exactly what is in New York's exactly? Is this including just the state arts? Should be just the state arts agency. But for right now, this is what it looks like. California is currently 35th in the United States. This is out excluding line items specific to a particular organization. This is just in local assistance grants, whereas New York, for example, is over $5 per capita and ranks number 4. Minnesota, of course, number 1 with their legacy amendment, which has a dedicated funding stream. And what you'll see on the left in this lovely graphic is where are we in terms of economic impact for the state of California? 7.5% of the state's economy were 821,000 jobs, and we're number 1 in arts jobs in the United States and 35th in arts spending per capita. So, the numbers don't really match in terms of what we bring to California and then the investment that the current administration and legislature are making in this sector. Next slide. So when we started off, after the January budget was announced, these were our priorities, which was to restore the 5 million to the California Arts Council's budget that was taken out last year. We were able, through our lobbying efforts, to have Assembly member and chair of the Arts Assembly Sports and Tourism Committee, Chris Ward of San Diego, and Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Los Angeles County, submit budget request letters to get that 5 million back. This was before the May revise. It was not included in the May revise. Not necessarily that we anticipate that, but it's just we have some legislators fighting for us on restoring that. In addition, the California Cultural Districts program, which really helps to lend to community and economic development, has had only received $10 million, and that was for the 14 existing programs. There was a point when it had 30 million and then 20 was clawed back. Senator Smallwood Cuevas has also requested a 5 million restoration to the Cultural Districts program for the Cultural District program expansion. And then we were also working with our colleagues at California Association of Museums on restoring that museum grant funding that was clawed back late in the budget cycle last year. It's actually 27.9 million, and even after applications were submitted. There's also a climate bond, Prop 4, that passed that had about 45 million in it for museums and cultural institutions that we're also actively trying to make sure is in this year's budget. So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks. So, and then, yeah, there's a lot of legislation where there's about 41 bills that we're currently tracking, but these are the two I'm going to highlight today. One is SB 456, which is California Beautification Act, and this is really to reduce barriers for muralists to be able to work in the state of California. It currently requires that they have a license to be a painting contractor. SB 456 would remove that requirement. And we're really grateful to Senator Angelique Ashby for authoring that. In addition, we've been taking a position on a ticketing bill sponsored by National Independent Venues California. Association of California, and that bans predatory ticketing practices. And that's something that we've seen. If you've run a venue, you see these sort of mirror sites where they say that it looks like they're your site. Maybe even before you put tickets on sale, they're saying that they have tickets for sale. Things that have really caused significant problems for consumers, for venues, and for artists. And so we've been active in that bill. I was actually lead testimony in one of the hearings, and it is something that we're continuing to track and hope that we'll get through the legislative process and to the governor's desk for signatures. So if you're interested, you can see Jenica has included our full list of policy priorities for this year. So go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about, go to the next slide again, where we are right now in terms of the budget. The May revise came out yesterday. This is where the governor now puts the next proposal forward. They've looked at the economy, where it stands right now. And even though we're the fourth largest economy in the world, it doesn't mean that where we are right now, in order to have a balanced budget, we have enough of the revenue coming in, both from the federal government, from income taxes, and we have a number of expenses and programs that maybe have been introduced over the years that we can no longer simply afford, is what happens when the governor puts out his next budget proposal. Unfortunately, and I'm going to highlight the second bullet here, something that came as a big shock to us yesterday was that the governor's May revise includes what is called a reversion of the $11.5 million that is what they call unspent funds relating to the implementation of the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. For those who have been with us for a while, and I see Hillary here from Theater Bay Area. Hillary, please share what you guys just put on social media. It's fantastic. This is the work of SB 1116, which was Senator Anthony Portantino authored a bill. This was really to support small budget nonprofit performing arts organizations under $2 million in revenue, to really address the issues since employment laws have changed, COVID impacts, rising costs, to be able to continue to put on the show. And it was a payroll reimbursement fund. It is a payroll reimbursement fund. And in full transparency, our nonprofit won the RFP to do the program administration. So we were shocked to hear that a item that is already in process, that an RFP went out and awards were made in terms of managing the program, and a legislative mandate, something the legislature asked for and would be pulled in the May revise. So we are actively working with the sponsor of the bill, which was Actors Equity, and others in the grassroots coalition of SB 1116, as well as the legislature, on trying to get that back before the budget is passed in late June. So you can work with us to make sure that that reversion, that clawback of funds does not happen. The other thing that was pulled in the May revise was $153,000 to the CAC for staffing. And then related to what Tooshar was talking about was the library. And they did look at putting $4.3 million from the general fund to help with a comprehensive digitization strategy initiative. So those are some things that are proposed. So just next slide is fine. I think it's really important to just remind everyone that this is proposed. This is not done yet. The legislature has their say. We're working with the legislature to actively, in particular, oppose the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund clawback. Tracy, did you want me to start getting into strategy and actions that here at this point? Is that the right next thing to do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, please.
Okay, great.
And
So,
if we want to spotlight Jason as well.
sure, Jason, you want to come on? Are you still there with us? Our lobbyist, Jason Schmelzer.
I'm here. Hey.
He's still in the room. He can join me. If not, I'll just keep talking here. So
Hey.
if we look at, hey, there he is. Hey, Jason.
I
So
appeared.
feel
Hi.
free to add in anything I didn't cover.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, no, you did a really comprehensive job. I would just sort of urge everybody, one of the ways that you can be the most helpful to us is giving us additional ways to talk to legislators about the importance of the arts and all the different ways that the state is supporting the arts. One of the challenges when you have a state government like California is that we do a lot of things, right? We're a very active state. We have a lot of engagement across a lot of different areas, uh, large safety net, et cetera. But that really does put us in competition a lot of the time. And I know we don't like to think of it that way, but we need to prove the value of our resources that we're pulling from the state. Julie and the CAA team does an amazing job of doing that, but your stories, your engagement is part of what really helps. And I know we're going to go into strategies here, but again, just remember it's a challenging environment. Even the folks that are proposing cuts sometimes mean well, but we need to lead them back to the better place.
Yeah, I love how you said that, Jason. Thank you. And I think what's also important for folks to know, particularly those in the chat who are really upset about the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund, as we are, would be that this is urgent. And I say this is urgent because the process is not very long from here to the end of the budget process, and it happens quickly. So if you are upset about this being pulled, we do encourage you to call your legislative offices right as soon as this meeting is over. Let them know how much this will impact you and what you offer to your community. Not so much just like your budget and why it impacts your budget, but more like what does it mean in terms of your being able to do what you do for the community and the district that they live in, the services that you offer, and the education services, the economic impact that you bring, the number of jobs that you're bringing. Because after all, SB 1116 was a jobs bill. Just like they're talking about film and TV tax credit, SB 1116 was directly to support payroll. So, this is cutting jobs, and that's really important for us to highlight. In terms of strategy, just to kind of give you some like under the hood and of what we do, what we do, and I work really closely with Jason, and he's our contract lobbyist. And we conduct advocacy meetings. So when you saw that we had Senator Smallwood Cuevas and also Assemblymember Ward writing budget letters, that's because we reached out to them and we worked to make that happen. It's not to say that legislators don't think of doing things on their own. They do, of course, but that is what lobbying is. Honestly, it's just really trying to influence them to go into the things that you care about. So we do a lot of meetings starting in the fall, before the January budget comes out. We meet with the administration as well. And we try to say, highlight what we think is important for the sector. It's part of why we do surveys and we do a lot of listening tours because we want to understand what's going on out there. Um, we also get very targeted. There's 120 legislators, so we couldn't possibly team of two here meet with all of them about our budget issues. So we might be very specific in targeting budget committees, leadership. That would be like the Speaker, Robert Rivas, or the the Senate Pro Tem, which is Mike McGuire. You've got chairs of budget committees, like those sorts of things. So you have to be pretty strategic with your time. We'll attend budget hearings and speak out in support of the requests that maybe get into the January or don't get in there, and we still want to socialize and say why it's necessary. So budget hearings for this year, for example, didn't talk about restoring 5 million to the California Arts Council, but we did in our public comment. Now, of course, we'll be showing up to talk about the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. We'll meet with the governor's office several times throughout a legislative year to advocate for funding, increased investment, issues and the legislation that we're working on as well. We'll attend informational hearings and we'll testify. Yesterday, we did just that at the Joint Committee hearing on the arts. And honestly, part of what we do is also lobby to make sure that those hearings happen. So we're talking to the consultants. We're saying why we need to have these hearings. And all of this is advocacy. This is educating the legislature. Yesterday's session was about the federal impacts. We were able to talk about the state impacts. This is really educating the whole of the legislature. It's broadcast, it's videotaped, it's recorded, they get a packet. So all of this really helps to educate them and inform them about what's going on in for us. We do a lot of public will building, right? Press, social media, op-eds. Our whole month of April is really a giant public will building campaign to talk about what are the reasons why arts are valued and necessary for California. Not so much we need money because we're poor. We're not. We are rich in what we have to offer to the state. Building cultural coalition. I saw Angie had asked, are we lobbying for California Humanities, for example? Soon as the federal cuts started coming down, the first person I reached out to was Rick Noguchi, who's the CEO of California Humanities. How can we help? How can we support? California Association of Museums, Association of California Symphony Orchestras, California Association of Public Arts Administrators. The list goes on and on. Individual artists, like we're working on the mural program. We really want to speak as much as possible as a unified voice. That's also working with labor, like Actors Equity, SAG-AFTRA. How can we see ourselves not as a siloed, separated sector, but as something that is really representative of the whole of the creative economy, and at least getting entertainment aligned with the nonprofit sector as well is a really important push for us, particularly when you see how important film and TV is to the state of California. We need to also educate that all the other aspects of it need equal support as well. This is an ecosystem. We know how ecosystems die when one part is failing, right? And then we meet with our lawmakers. And so there's a link there to do some that you can do that as well. And we build the resources for data and storytelling. We might aggregate those from other sources, like our partners at Americans for the Arts. Maybe some of our regional partners do build data as well, like American Arts for LA, or our friends at San Diego Art Matters, or our San Jose Arts Advocates. All those things, we're building the story particularly, and it's really, really critical that it comes with, as Jason said, with the storytelling. We really need to get to the heart of the matter, but we need to have the facts as well. So that's kind of our grass top strategies, Jason. Anything I'm missing here as we're thinking about what it is? Sometimes I forget all the things that we're doing.
No, I think again, you do a really good job of covering everything. I would just say if you have, I'm actually routinely surprised, maybe more than like any other client area, how many people in the arts have direct relationships with legislators. So if you have those, let us know. That's really
Excellent
important.
point. Excellent point. Yes. If you can pick up a bat phone and call your legislator directly, or text them. I've had many folks that I know who know legislators, and before a hearing, I might be like, can you text your friend and say, support this bill, or support our, oppose this, or whatever it is. So absolutely. They want to hear from their constituents. They represent you in the legislature. So, and your board members, great point, Ted. Your board members may be connected to elected officials. It's really important to do what we call power mapping with your board. Ask them, who do you know in the California legislature? Who do you know in Congress? Who do you know in our city council and our board of supervisors? And how close are you? And how much influence do you have there? These are really important questions for every nonprofit to be asking at this moment in time in particular. I'll go to the next slide, which is actually good segue into grassroots, which is where, the grass tops is really your lobbying organizations, sort of these more major coalitions that are doing that type of one-to-one, being in what we call the building, working the offices on things. But when you're in a district, that's more like your grassroots, right? So that is participating in Advocacy Day, all the letter campaigns, calls to your legislators. And one of the things I wanted to point out too, like inviting your lawmakers to events and showing them the power of your work in the community. So we can tell the stories a lot, but when they actually show up and see what it does, that's when the light bulb moments go off. So when you're, invite them, contact your local media. It's really important that we get this out in the press, what's going on, the confluence of events, the federal, state, and we're going to hear about local impacts as well in terms of funding cuts. What does that mean for arts and culture in the state of California? What does that mean in your local community? What's happening? I can tell you in my local community, I have 2 performing arts centers that are struggling mightily already. So, what does it mean? Where are we going with this? And talk to your local media. Local media typically are looking for stories. So pitch them this story. Now is the time. So I'm going to also encourage you to use your power of your mailing list. One of the things the National Independent Venues Association did so effectively during COVID is that they used the mailing lists of all these independent venues across the United States to lobby Congress for the Save Our Event, Save Our Stages Act. That they sent in something like 800,000 or more letters. We're sending in thousands of letters. There's over 800,000 arts workers in the state of California. We need those types of numbers because at the end of the day, this becomes a numbers game. Which is the most important priority to my district? What's the most important priority to my state? What's the most important priority to the federal government? So it's a numbers game. So I know people hate to say, I don't want to get political. I don't want to ask my mailing list for things. I don't know, folks. I'm not sure how much longer we can wait. The time is now. Every aspect of our infrastructure is getting cut. So you see that in there. And then use the power of social media. Again, Hillary just posted it in there. Fantastic, great video about the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. Hillary and Theater Bay Area did this within, I think, less than 24 hours. Incredibly impressive. Getting out there. Really important. Tag your legislators when you do this. Hillary, I hope Senator Scott Wiener is tagged in that post. Make sure you're tagging the people that are need to hear this, and getting that out there, and also tag us so we can reshare it. So those are some of the high level strategies and actions that we take. Some of the ones that we implore you to take at the grassroots level. We appreciate those who are here with us today and ask that you also share this out. And yes, the PowerPoint will be available. I think it's next slide and we go into whatever it may be. Yeah, so any questions?
There is one in the Q&A, Julie from Tara. Does the reversion of the equitable payroll fund mean the applications that are currently pending will not be approved, or is this the amount for next year?
Oh, Tara, I wish I could tell you this was the amount for next year. This is the existing fund. And that's why it was such a shock for us to receive the information yesterday. So yes, this is the current, and that's why it's urgent. And I would use the word crisis for us to react at this moment in time. So sorry to give that report.
Yeah, and we're also hearing I see your note, Tara, how upsetting it is, and we are also hearing it's unprecedented.
Well, it's unprecedented potentially for certain agencies. Unfortunately, this is similar to what happened to the Museum Grant Fund. So but it's certainly not common, I would say, that if after it's been what one would assume would be encumbered because it's the RFP was done, the applications have been opened, people expected that they, after applying, would be able to at least get some either acceptance or not. So it's unusual, but it's not unprecedented, unfortunately.
So I could give a brief explanation of maybe why. Over the past several years, regardless of what the governor said, over the past several years in dealing with the deficits, they've borrowed a lot of money from internal funds where they typically borrow money to balance budgets and things like that. And they've sort of run out of internal options for dealing with the budget. So they're having to do things like this. This has actually been a problem that's been building for 2-3 years.
Any other questions for anybody? I know there's, and feel free to write your comments too, as folks are starting to do in the chat there in terms of what you're doing. But for sure, we're in this together, and we will do everything possible working with our partners, this being California Arts Advocates, our lobbying organization, working with our partners at Actors Equity and the SB 1116 Coalition, and to try and reverse this funding cut. So we'll keep you posted. It's very fresh, and we're strategizing right now all the different things, but our grass top strategy is in place, and we're got some great relationships in the legislature, and it's really important that we share with them how critical this is, that this is not taken out at this point in time.
Great. Any more questions? Let me pop up. Not in there. Any more in the chat? Thank you, Jackie. Okay, if you feel free to continue to ask questions in the Q&A feature and we'll respond to them. And let's shift over to our local discussion with our guests. And first up, Peter Allen, who's a co-founder of San Jose Arts Advocates. Peter, there you are. Hi, thanks.
Greetings.
I think
How's everyone?
your slides are next.
Hooray. Well, I do wish that I had better news than Julie and our statewide advocates about the situation here at the local level, both in San Jose and I think a lot of us are dealing with as well. But I do want to emphasize one thing. Greetings, everyone. Peter Allen, San Jose Arts Advocates, coming to you from Muwekma Ohlone land here in San Jose, California. My pronouns are he, him. San Jose Arts Advocates was founded about 6 years ago, just pre-pandemic, out of a desire from our creative community to get more organized around advocacy issues and the policies and movements that were impacting the work of artists, arts practitioners, nonprofit leaders, and just generally the ability of folks in San Jose to experience and to engage with the arts and culture. And we felt for a long time, as many of you probably have, sort of second fiddle, the last person picked for the ball team. And we were getting a little tired of not having a seat at the table. So we decided to try to create our own seat and bring our seat to the table, or bring the folding chair, as Shirley Chisholm used to say. And that's why San Jose Arts Advocates were created. Unfortunately, we launched about 1 month before the pandemic hit. So we've spent the better part of the past 4 or 5 years really maintaining and sustaining and trying to defend arts and cultural funding from the city of San Jose, programs that the city of San Jose runs and operates, but also work to, as well as we can, educate our community around some of these critical issues, how they can get engaged in them, because as artists, as was mentioned earlier, we're not used to getting political. But San Jose Arts Advocates, one of our key tenets and our motto, in fact, is that we are not afraid to say the F word, although I won't say it here because I don't want to offend anyone. But we give a buck about art, basically. So that's really been our core tenet philosophy. We're not afraid to speak up and speak out because our community deserves that, and they need a stronger voice, and we're here to help them raise their voice and also be their voice as well. So I'm going to go through a brief deck here that'll just lay out our purpose, some of our goals right now, and then I'll speak to how that interrelates to and connects with the work that's being done at the state and national level. So if you can move ahead with the next slide, Aisha. All right, so who we are. San Jose Arts Advocates is not a 501c anything. We are a collective, a collaborative. We're entirely 100% volunteer-run organization, and we're driven by our local creative community. That's artists, it's arts and cultural practitioners, it's nonprofit leaders, and then arts advocates, arts patrons, pretty much anyone who gives a buck. We are here to welcome you and support you. This is a picture of our core team at our launch a number of years ago in 2020. February 2020, a month before the pandemic hit, California at least. And our leadership evolves over time based on who has the time and who has the ability and who has the resources that are needed for what's going on in that moment. But proud to say we have a network of over 1,500 arts advocates in San Jose alone, and expanding beyond. And we are also trying to serve as a beacon, not just for arts and culture in San Jose, but for other cities, municipalities, communities that lack that centralized structure for advocacy. We would love to be a model for you. We hope we are a good model, and we are happy to share resources and share insights in our as we continue to grow and evolve with you across the state, and to ensure that we have better advocacy at the local level, because we absolutely believe that all politics and all policy is local. It starts here. The legislators we are working with in Sacramento, and Julie and the team are working with in Sacramento, they started on city councils, they started on school boards, they started in county supervisors' offices, and then moved up to those positions, or moved on, I should say, because every one of these roles is important. So we are doing our best to educate and advocate at this level, so that once these elected officials matriculate to Sacramento and to Washington, D.C., they are better informed about our issues. And then we're having conversations about what is the best policy, not whether or not a policy is needed. So we can move on to our next slide. what we do, how we do the work that we attempt to do. We build public will. That comes in a few different ways. Primarily, it's through the electoral political process. We get engaged in our local city council elections. We hold candidate forums specific to the arts and culture. We recently started to conduct candidate questionnaires. We do not do candidate endorsements. What we do is we collect information from the candidates running for these offices, primarily city council, because we're focused on the San Jose area, and we disseminate that information to our network, and we trust that everyone can make informed and decisions about what's in their best interest and the best interest of our creative community. But as of yet, we do not endorse and we don't get involved for specific candidates. We also have hosted meet and greets and more casual encounters with our elected officials, as well as candidates. We even hosted a mayoral candidate speed dating night. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we had pretty good turnout, and it was a really fun event. So we try to keep our educational efforts fun while informative. We are artists after all, and the last thing we want anyone to do is have to sit through a very boring and remedial and rote kind of a candidate forum about why did you decide to run for office? No, we want to know deeper, have a deeper conversation with them, and we do have a deeper conversation with them about what our needs really are, truly are at the grassroots level and the ground level in the arts, and how they can be supportive. We also, like I said, amplify the political voice of our creative community. We look to not only be their voice and stand up and have our leadership step up and step out on behalf of the entire network of our advocate community, but we also strive to make our advocates and our artists better advocates. We try to give them tools and skills and encouragement, shall we say, talking points and strategy, and let them behind the curtain a little bit to empower them to speak out for themselves. And that also involves pointing them to groups like CFTA and CAA and SP Creates here locally in Santa Clara County, who do great work to educate and inform and empower new up-and-coming leaders, but also anyone who wants to take on a greater role in advocacy. So we're trying to amplify, but also encourage our community to be more engaged themselves. And then we provide opportunities for learning and networking and collaboration. We realize that advocacy, as Julie mentioned, is an intersectional, intergenerational, and intergeographical kind of a project. We are building concentric circles of support for the quality of life in our community by collaborating with housing advocates, library advocates, parks advocates, open space advocates, and even getting engaged on social issues, which we've done in the past through forums where we've brought together artists and city officials and business leaders around controversial pieces of public art that have spurred a deeper conversation. And we try to see ourselves as a convener to bring together disparate minds to try and find consensus around the values that we all share, and using the arts to do that. And then we, of course, collaborate with our statewide partners on a regular basis on Arts Advocacy Day and other times to expand their reach and to leverage our network to support those statewide goals. So we'll certainly be sending something out about the Equitable Payroll Fund very soon, an advocacy alert, to let our folks know that they need to get engaged to preserve that funding, because we were very helpful in organizing around obtaining the funding in the first place. So I'm going to walk you through, that's sort of what we do in a nutshell. I'll let you know where you can find out more in a minute, but I just want to walk you through some of the key priorities we're working on here locally, and I'll speak to how they resonate at the broader level. So we can go to the next slide. So these are our, we try to focus our work in some key areas because we realize we are a volunteer group, and I would highly recommend anyone looking to start their own advocacy group, start with manageable goals, start with goals that you can achieve, goals that you have the bandwidth to achieve within the group that you have, and also try to find as much consensus as possible so that everyone is on board and there's no one feels like they're being left out or they're not being heard. If we're all working on some common goals, then we'll have a lot better results because everyone will be pulling together. So one of our key policy goal right now in San Jose has to do with, I won't go into the boring details here, but the transient occupancy tax, which is the tax on hotel stays, which most cities and counties have, but they spend it in different ways. In San Jose, only a portion of it comes to arts, culture, and tourism and entertainment economy programs. However, all of our arts and culture programs, including our cultural grants and our cultural office staff at the city level, are funded out of the TOT, which is, of course, a very tenuous and tumultuous funding source, given that when a pandemic comes, that funding is pretty much zeroed out. So we have spent a lot of time over the past 2 years trying to retain, maintain, sustain funding from both the TOT and the general fund to support our arts and cultural programming. But now one-time funding from COVID is running out, and the city is focused on a lot of more myopically focused on some other core areas that don't involve the arts. So right now we are looking for new opportunities. So we're trying to work with the city to develop opportunities to expand the TOT apportionment that comes to the arts and culture. So over time, we're hoping to get 100% apportionment of the TOT to our programming. But in the meantime, we're looking at opportunities like a baselining of the general fund allocation, which would allow us to apply any new revenue from the hotel tax to arts and culture. I don't want to get too wonky, but you kind of get a sense of how wonky we do get. And if you dig into this at the local level, you're going to be dealing with a lot of kind of wonky issues. Local politics can also be very, very obtuse and very, very convoluted. So we're trying to navigate that system to find success in very small ways. And this would create a very incremental amount of revenue growth. But as we all know, we do more with less in our arts community. And in San Jose, our arts community is very nimble and primarily small and medium-sized organizations, and we generate a big bang for our buck. So every little bit does count. Moving on to the next slide, a more philosophical priority we have, and this is really comes from San Jose Arts Advocates founding, not wanting to be second fiddle or left out of the conversation. We have a lot of major events coming to San Jose and the South Bay in the next year, including the World Cup, the Super Bowl, the men's basketball tournament, the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And the city is looking to leverage those opportunities to showcase San Jose. Well, we want to make sure that we are showcasing our local artists and our local community and having creating a very authentic picture of the wonderful diversity that we have here in San Jose and all of our wonderful arts and cultural programming. And we feel that we, as arts advocates, as arts practitioners, we are the subject matter experts, and we should have a seat at the table in the planning for some of these activations and events that are going to be going on and to celebrate San Jose. Much like Arts for LA, who you'll hear from in a second, we're involved in planning for the upcoming Olympics in LA. We're really excited to see the level of investment and engagement that they received from the County of Los Angeles around that. We did not receive, and we have not received, despite our outreach and our advocacy, that seat at the table and that level of engagement. There will be an upcoming community meeting where we'll be able to voice these concerns and our queries to the 1 year temporary director of sports and entertainment for San Jose that they've brought in just for 1 year to manage all these events. But we're not yet seeing that meaningful engagement, and that's very concerning. Longer term, we of course want to make sure that artists are centered in all of our conversations around the local economy through the cultural district program at the state level, but also local movements to create entertainment zones, which we are hoping are not simply going to be excuses to have block parties with everyone getting drunk, and more an opportunity for us to highlight the arts and culture in our community in easier ways. And then moving on to our final priority, we are very much concerned with updating our city's cultural roadmaps. We have a cultural plan and a public art master plan that are woefully out of date. So we are doing our best to encourage the city to identify funding and opportunities to update those plans. And it looks as though those plans might get pushed to the next general plan update, which would be a couple of years down the line. But we are unique in a way in San Jose. We do have an arts and cultural plank in our general plan. So there is hope that we will be able to create and craft a better vision updated for the current situation and current reality between the arts community, the city leaders, and also the broader community, so we can come to some consensus about where San Jose is headed in terms of its support for arts and cultural programming. And then we're also working to get better information back from our residents through an annual city resident survey. So we're hoping to get more arts and culture reflected in that survey. And we can slip to the last couple of slides and I will wrap up. I'm so sorry for taking too much time. Right now, we're in the midst of budget advocacy for the city as well. This is an annual process as we're going through at the state. We're doing it at the same time at the local level. So we can go to the next slide and just see where things are at right now. SJA has been lucky to have meetings with all of our city council members and the mayor and or their staff. So they have been alerted to all these priorities I'm bringing before you right now, as well as our budget priorities. And as of right now, the budget looks as though arts funding is protected, but they're also dipping into rebudgeted carryover funds and reserve funds, and we're very concerned about that. So we're hoping to have get a little more investment into those programs, but we're also not looking. We're also not very hopeful, simply because the mayor and his council majority are really focused myopically on some other issues, shall we say. So we'll be getting to the final budget for the city just at the same time that the state is, in the middle of June. So a lot of cities, if you work on the July to June fiscal year, that's when these things are happening. So you'll be hearing more hopefully from your local advocates about that. And then just flipping ahead, where you can find us if you want to know more about us, in the next slide, I think. There we go. You can visit us at sjartsadvocates.org. We have a mailing list there. If you're local, or if you're not, you just want to learn more about what we're doing, please sign up. You can find us on social media, most of the social media sites at San Jose Arts, and you can always email us at hello@sjartsadvocates.org. And then on the final slide, if you really feeling frisky and you live in the area, take our survey. We're doing our own field survey of local arts groups and where things stand, so we can get a better sense of where they're at and how we can best improve our advocacy. I think that's it, and I hopefully didn't take more than 10 minutes, but I was only supposed to do 5, so I appreciate the extra time. And you got some links. You got some links in the chat there for how to get in touch with us as well.
Great. Thank you, Peter.
You're so welcome. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. And thank you for both the insights into where to start in terms of forming a group, and then also detailing your work. Okay, let's see. And then if we could shift and invite Aki Brahman, the from Arts for LA, to share your comments. And I think we can take the slides down. Well, I guess you don't have slides. We could take the slides down and just feature you, right?
Yeah, I think that would be better.
Thank you, Peter. That would be great. Thank you for being here, Aki.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Aki Brahman. So I'm the policy associate here at Arts for LA. So Arts for LA is the region's only unified voice for the arts. And we build and contribute to coalitions working to protect and promote LA's arts ecosystem. So I'm going to start by saying that I don't have any fancy slides for you all today, so apologies in advance. So I'll be going over the arts funding cuts we are seeing across Los Angeles and how we are mobilizing in response. So everybody already have heard this so many times that we are facing a funding crisis at every level of the government. So more than 500 nonprofits across the country have lost over 25 million in awarded federal funds, and over 1 million of those losses are here in LA, and more reports are continuing to come in. To give some local examples, the East West Players, the longest running theater of color in the US, lost active federal grants meant to support a world premiere. The Armory Center for Arts have lost almost 400,000 in active grants from the NEA and IMLS. So at the county level, we're seeing an 11% cut to the organizational grant program, a lifeline for many nonprofits. So that's over 600,000 pulled from general operating support. So this is happening at the same time the county is facing growing obligations. The county is facing a $4 billion legal settlement. And as you all know, we had the LA wildfires. So the estimate is that the wildfires will cost the county $250 billion in damages over a period of time. So it's tough time for LA County, and the same goes for the city. So the LA City is grappling with a budget deficit of $1 billion. So the mayor's proposed budget has eliminated 24 Department of Cultural Affairs DCA positions. 14 of these are direct layoffs. A little over 500,000 cut to the city's art grants program. So this will jeopardize around 55 grantees and over 350 creative jobs for the next 1 year. So the DCA is also seeing a $2 million in cuts to cultural programming, exhibitions, and like festivals. So this all adds up because, as you all know, LA is going to host the Olympic in a few years. So this all trickles down and it will affect the Olympics cultural program. The city has also cutting staff for many historic community art sites. Art sites, for example, the Hollyhock Theater, Hollyhock House, that's a UNESCO designated site, and which will potentially face closure because there might not be enough staff, and this will also lead to they will lose the UNESCO Heritage Site tag too. So yeah. All told, this cuts will lead to fewer jobs, fewer grants, and slower payments, and likely closure of several nonprofits, and particularly those serving low-income migrant people of color communities. But Arts for LA is pushing back. So we are working alongside a coalition of different queer arts organizations to protect trans creativeness and diverse programming. We're providing legal strategies, resources, holding community conveying, and directly engaging with elected officials. This week alone, we joined the Center Theater Group for a workshop on grassroots advocacy. We're supporting UCLA's Center for Philanthropy in connecting nonprofits to legal tools. We're also working with Theater Procedures of SoCal, who are conveying local arts leaders and public officials this weekend, I'm sorry. We're also doing like this week too, we sent like emails to all the LA City council members' offices, all the supervisors' offices, making them aware of the cuts that they're proposing and how it might affect the arts and culture, the arts ecosystem of LA. So if you all want to get involved, so we, Arts for LA currently have 2 active letter campaigns in our action center opposing these local cuts. I believe the links would be available in the chat for those action centers, so you can sign in to our letter campaign. We have also launched a local grant loss tracker to collect real-time data, which will be shared with the state and national partners, and that will be used to press federal lawmakers for accountability. So we are also using this insights to make the case to funders that now is the time to step up and fill in the gaps left by the government shortfalls. So yeah, you can also find our arts funding response toolkit in the chat. So which will include everything that I just said, but in more detail. So you'll also find resources and what you can do to fight back. So I'll definitely suggest you check that out. So yeah, I want to end by saying that this isn't a moment of crisis, it's a moment of organizing, and we are inviting everyone here to be a part of the pushback. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Akib, and thank you for such proactive examples and for working so hard to tell the scale of the story. So appreciate your work and partnership. And then next up, we have Michael Angelo Camacho from SD Arts Matters in San Diego. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Oh boy. Okay. Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Angelo Camacho. I'm with SD Art Matters. I'm going to skip the pleasantries or a lot of the pleasantries just because I can simply say that we're the Arts for LA for San Diego, or we're the San Jose Arts Advocates of, San Diego. So what I want to share today is, first of all, we were volunteer based and now we are funded and staffed, and that we used to be city hyper focused. Now we are county focused. We do have 18 municipalities in San Diego County, and we do try to serve all. But one of the ways that we manage the load is we do have a sister organization called Arts Plus Culture San Diego, who mainly focuses on City of San Diego now. So one of the things that we have worked on together is what we call the penny for the arts. Just like the other municipalities across the state, we have a transient occupancy tax. Ours is 10.5 cents on the dollar, I believe. So what that translates to in projections this coming year, our citywide TOT projections are $331.4 million. I just wanted to give you a sense of what that number is. And what we've convinced the city council to approve is 1 cent of the 10 cents to go towards the arts and cultures. So there was a policy, it was approved in December 5, 2023. And ideally, 1 cent, so about $30 million should go to the arts and culture. Now, because of the state of the budget, they can't always meet that, but that's the intent, and they do track that number. So last year, the arts were funded at $16.1 million. Hello, everybody. But this year we received cuts down to 13.8 million. So the cuts were across the board. It was about 10% across all departments. Our arts or cultural department staff did not experience any staff cuts, but it did mean that there was a big reduction on how much funding would be received by our organizations, about $1 million or so. And then the other thing that I want to mention about that is that so if they were to fund it fully, it would take an additional $17.7 million for us to reach our funding target scenarios. Because of how precarious everything is happening at the state and national level, our strategy that we pursued and arts and culture pursued was not to get additional cuts. And from the revisions that were just published yesterday, we did not get additional cuts. So there's still going to be about, $10 million or that's going to go out to the community. It's in our assessment, it is a win, but obviously we don't want to get additional cuts next year, and we do want to be more aggressive, hopefully next year. At the county level, so there used to be an Arts and Culture Commission at the county level that was decommissioned about 2 decades ago. And one of the things that we did was we brought it back. Like the last time we were super active as a coalition was bringing it back, and we succeeded. So the commission has come back. One of the issues, though, is that it has not been funded since getting reinstituted. So just like how we've been hyper-focused on Penny for the Arts of the City, what we've been hyper-focused on at the county level is getting the county funded. It doesn't even have funding for staff. So what we've been really focused on is making sure that we get funding to put together that team that would run really distribute out money out to the community. And we have been successful. I will say that the budget at the county level was published on May 1st, thanks to an email campaign and a calling campaign that many of our advocates across the county participated in. We did get a champion who would instruct the Economic Development Department, where the commission sits, to fund it at $350,000. And if we succeed in that, we do have a big, I'm going to say philanthropic partner who said, if we can get that infrastructure in place, then they'd be willing to kickstart some early funding. And with that, I think we'll be able to backfill some of the money that was taken away at the city level. So that's the big news I have. And if you're from San Diego, right now our campaign is, obviously, if you have bare minimum, do those emails, do those phone calls. I'm also looking for people to participate in public hearings on June 3rd and June 9th. And eventually, a bit further down the road, after these public hearings are over, I will be sending out a coalition letter that people can sign on to, with the hope that we can get this commission finally funded.
Thank you, Michael. And let's spotlight everyone on the panel and see if we can open up the conversation. Unfortunately, we only have 5 more minutes, but I'm just going to throw a couple of questions out there. Going back to Michael's question in the chat earlier, what does lobbying elected officials What's the ratio of success or effort between grassroots and grass tops or direct lobbying versus numbers and grassroots advocacy? Any insights or anything to share there for those of you who are leading advocacy efforts?
If I can start, I think one of the things we had to do was prove that we are funded and that we are organized, especially at the county level. They have grown accustomed to not be advocated towards, especially when it comes to arts and culture. So now that we have a funded group of folks and we have begun organizing our constituents across the county, they felt the pressure immediately and they responded immediately.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? We could spotlight Tooshar as well.
I mean, I'll just add that I think, you know, in an ideal world, it's a both and approach, right? So, you know, you have that, it is a numbers game, 100%. Every legislator will tell you that, every elected official will tell you that. We are in a lot of competition for prioritization. They have a lot of people coming at them all the time saying, my issue is the most important issue. Every advocate for every issue feels that way about their particular cause. So I think it is about the amount of grassroots that you can mobilize is really important. The more people we have engaged, the more they will pick up their heads. And then it's a relationship strategy too, you know, these long-term relationships. And I think what I really enjoyed hearing from everybody here today, because I think what's really important is to understand, as Peter mentioned too, is that people start maybe in city council, they end up in your state legislature, and then they end up in Congress, and then they come back, and then they become mayor, and you know, I mean, like they move around, and so developing those relationships at every level as possible, and starting off early is really important because somebody who's a committed public official might be in it for a very long time. So I would say it's a both and. I don't know which one's necessarily more effective. It depends kind of on the issue, I would say, at the time and the timing. Sometimes there are things that we've gotten done very much behind the scenes that we did not need to engage grassroots advocates. And sometimes it's important to know the sensitivity of things. Like sometimes it's better to not make a big issue out of something and you can do it behind the scenes. Sometimes you have to make a big issue out of it and you have to show the importance and the numbers. And that's when the grassroots is so critical. But nothing happens ultimately without grassroots in that it's really the people's voice that changes policy.
And I do know we have a lot of advocates, seasoned advocates in the webinar. If you've got comments to share in the chat as well from your perspective and your experience, we all want to learn from each other. It's great. Anything else to add to that? I do have kind of a follow-up question too. Really kind of woven through all that you talked about today is the need to mobilize networks and activate networks, especially with what's happening on the federal level. It's really hard, even just as our state arts agency, to get everybody connected on the federal level. I'm going to start a state level advocacy organization capacity. So we're really looking at leaning into regional network building and just in your experience on the local level, what resources are needed to network us together and get activated? What's worked? What do you see working in other states, Tooshar or Julie? Any comments on that in terms of mobilizing networks and anybody in the chat? What resources do you need and tools that we can provide?
Well, I'll start. I think, you know, things that I'm seeing, you know, what I'm seeing, which is, you know, actually a great thing is, you know, this thought that from a cultural perspective, you know, while the unfortunate side of it is that we're seeing, you know, we feel like that we're under attack. I think that the good news has been is that there has just been a huge amount of information sharing, among the humanities, among the, the arts space, also in the library and the museum space. Just a lot of information going on, not just at the, from my end, I focus on federal policy, but this obviously has huge impacts on the state and local levels, as we've heard from some of the participants today. And I just think that information sharing needs to continue, because that's what helped builds the stories, that would help build the, the advocacy defense, for our agencies right now at this time. So it's been fantastic work. I think that we're up to the challenge, but it hasn't been easy for these last few months for sure.
Great. Thank you for the comments in the chat too. Needing talking points, different captains. Others want to comment? Okay, we are at time.
There was one last question in the chat, so I thought we'd just address it. It says, do you anticipate beginning advocacy efforts around the 2026 midterms and governor's race? And I can say that California advocates will be working on the governor's race. And Tooshar, maybe you can specifically speak to midterms.
Yeah, I mean, the particularly on the House side, they are always in cycle. So what we typically do is in August of 2026, we'll have our congressional report card, which comes from the political side of the Arts Action Fund, to determine, who has supported the arts. We're actually going to have a lot of benchmarks to talk about, whether it be signing on to dear colleagues, how they vote on funding for the NEA, for IMLS, for NEH. So it's going to be a really important time. It's going to be congressional elections, and we really want to hold their feet to the fire, because they have a role here right now, and they're the ones who can stop what's happening on the administration side of things.
Great. There's a question from Lauren in the chat. Does the May budget, Julie, you see that? You want to respond to that?
So yes, the May budget revise is, is the the administration's proposal for what the budget should look like. Now the legislature will determine their priorities. By each house, Senate and Assembly will make their own priorities. They'll respond to it. There'll be hearings in the next several weeks that will talk about all of the things that are in the May revise, what was pulled, maybe, those sorts of things, discussions around that. And then there'll be, the legislature will come up with a matching budget, bill essentially, that will be done by June 15th. There's a constitutionally mandated, so they continue to get paid. And so then after that, the governor has a certain amount of time to either, line item veto, those sorts of things. So it continues to be a negotiation. What we have seen in the past is that, this is our time to influence what we want the legislature to fight for us on. The legislature are the people, right? They represent the people. And so, that's who's there to fight for what your interests are. And that's why we say it's a numbers game, right? So they need to hear from people in their district to say, this matters to my district, therefore I need to prioritize that. That's that grassroots approach. So yes, getting to legislators now is our best approach for the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. And we'll have, again, this was all very new yesterday. We were in Sacramento all day, and now we're having our strategy sessions with the lobbying team, with Actors Equity, who's going to be driving a lot of this as well. And we'll have lots of materials coming out by next week for you to be able to respond to, talking points, all of those good things. So just bear with us for a minute as we adjust to this very new news that we did not see coming.
I'd like to throw one more question out to the group as what have you seen has been effective in terms of switching on a light bulb with decision makers on the local, state, or level, state or federal level, for decision makers or lawmakers who aren't naturally arts supporters. We're talking a lot about needing to work across the aisle in terms of gaining support. And we do know that folks in our rural communities in California are always looking for resources in terms of how to build those relationships and gain supporters. If anybody has any insights on that, what they've seen has been effective or what they know is could be effective for getting non-art supporters on board.
So I think I'll answer this, and I'm sure other people have comments, but I think it's really helping to connect the dots with what they are interested in. Everyone here can speak about that. Sometimes that's very difficult to, if they're into education, then you need to somehow talk about education. And that can go, if they're really into serving their rural communities, then you absolutely need to talk about how the arts need to be in the rural communities.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Jackie shared show them economic impact, and we're always working to try to get that data out for folks.
Yeah, there's great materials out there, both from Americans for the Arts, National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, that really give you a lot of talking points. National Assembly of State Arts Agencies did a whole report on this. They really studied what would be important, what are the words that we should use, like strengthening is a good word that they say, strengthening communities and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, we've definitely leaned heavily on economic impact as a sector for a very long time. I think when you're in, a problem in terms of the economy, which I think many of us sort of are talking about right now, it is about jobs. It is about how do we put food on the table. It is about that these are real jobs and that these have downstream economic benefits as well. So it's not just arts that benefit when there's a healthy arts community. It's so many other things. But I think really illustrating the full value package of what it is difficult in a short period of time. And but that's why these are long-term relationships. This is not something you're not going to walk in one time and change someone's mind necessarily, but over a series of conversations, visits, you can get them to be, they will become your champion. And I think when you find them repeating your talking points, I'm sure all advocates have experienced this, then you go, oh, I guess we're getting there because they're using our talking points.
Right. Any closing statements there? I know we're over time, but I just really wanted to.
Only that this is really the time to implement these great strategies by the participants here today. I think we've been here before, and I bet on us. But the time is now.
Yeah, great.
And
I
like
think
Akib, what you said, what was it? It's not a crisis, it's an organizing opportunity. I love that.
right. I think too, the scale of the effort on the federal in terms of dismantling some of the cultural infrastructure points to how critical, how vital we are. And in terms of knowledge, all the positive benefits that we do have. So that coalition building opportunity is pretty powerful too. Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Michael, Akib, Tooshar, Julie, for sharing your approach to all of this and the information that you have to share. And we'll be following up with a recording and resources that were mentioned in the conversation in the chat. You'll get a follow-up email. And thank you again for joining us. And please stay tuned and make sure you're signed up for our action alerts so that we can keep you in the loop on what happens next. Thank you, everyone. Okay.